you might find something to be a little bit off. If I do a search for some books, I have already loaded all of the book data, but if I navigate to this page, we're loading the book data. It doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. Didn't we cache that, right? Well, so here's the problem. We cached it all right, but we cached it in this book search query key, not in the book query key. And so when we land on that book page, we're actually trying to ask React Query for a book at this specific query key in the cache, while all of that book's information is in the book search. So what we want to do is as soon as we get books from book search, we want to insert those same books into the cache at this query key as well. And that's actually pretty easy to do by updating our book search config to do something when this search is successful. So we'll add a config option here, and we'll say on success, we'll get the books, and we'll say for each book of those books, we'll say query cache, set query data, and then we specify the key. So this is the key we want to set it in the cache, and our book ID will be book.id, and then the value will be the book. And really, that's all it takes. So if I go to the Discover page, we look for Sanderson books, and now I click here, boom, there we are. It was in the cache. We're solid. Now, another situation that's very similar is if I go over here to my reading list or to my finished books and I click here, then it also needs to take a second to load, but our backend engineers are actually sending us all of the book information for these list items, and so we can do the same thing for the list items. So if we want to do this for the list items, we're basically going to do the same thing. In fact, I'll just copy and paste this, and instead of books, this is going to be list items. And for every list item of these list items that we get back on the successful request, we're going to set the query data for book with the book ID of list item.book.id, and the value will be the list item.book. And a big thank you to our backend engineers for sending the book along with the list item when we make that request. So if we save that, come over here, we'll go to our finished books, do a refresh. So we load up that list item, we load that book into the query cache, and as soon as I click this, it's instantaneous. I'm not a super big fan of having the query key copy pasted over here, because what if I change that query key, then everything breaks. So what I'm going to do instead is right down here, I'm going to make a function called set query data for book. We'll take that book and we will do this. Put it right there. And then I'll simply call set query data for book. And then we'll do the same thing over here. We'll import set query data for book from the books utils, and then we'll set the query data for book with list item.book. And let's make sure to export that, and that should work for us. So now we go to our reading list, we go to any one of these books, it loads instantaneously. We go to the Discover page, we go to any one of these books, and it loads instantaneously because that book is already in the cache. So in review, what we did here is we added a config option for on success for this get book search config, which applies to our use book search, and incidentally also applies to this refetch book search query, which we just implemented. And so when that is successful, we iterate through all of the books we got and set the query data for the book so that when we use this query, we have that in the cache already. And then we reuse that same logic for our list items because our backend engineers were nice enough to send along the book with each one of the list items for this specific scenario.